Okay, so we're going to go over some keyframing. And what is keyframing? Well, it's much easier to understand by seeing it, so we're going to get there. We're going to use effects that you've already learned about, such as some filters and opacity, and then we're going to get into some keyframing. What I've done is I've opened up a new file, 1920 by 1080, and I've layered a couple of things in here. Right now I have a 10-second clip from a student event score on my bottom layer, and then in a layer above that I have my JPEG. It's just a still image that doesn't change over time. And then I brought in a third layer I have my black circle on a white background, and then I have another layer of a white circle on a black background. So what I've done is I've brought in approximately a 10-second movie, and then when I bring in my images, they'll have a certain amount of frames, and so I just stretch them so that everything fills out to be the same. The other thing I've done is I've taken the audio off of the video track. We don't need it, and it just might get in the way. Again, I unlinked it and then simply deleted it in order to do that. Okay, so you already know some things about transparency and layers because you've done them with transitions. So something when we're working with layers, it's really helpful to simplify the imagery. So I'm just going to go ahead and find a black and white filter. I just typed black in here, and a black and white filter under image control came up, and I just changed my photograph to black and white. And what I'm going to do is change the transparency. Now this is a tool you've already used, but you didn't really use it for montage purposes. You used it to creating dissolves and fade-ins. So I'm just going to use that same tool and play it. And actually, maybe I'll make the transparency a little less, so the focus is really on, maybe even a little less. So there. So you see my video is kind of just sort of an abstract way of colorizing that black and white image. You know, of course you can layer it however you want. Another way to simplify an image is to make it a very high contrast, which I won't do right now. Okay, but let's look at another way. I'm going to go into effects control, and when you were optimizing you saw these two effects, motion and opacity, as well as time remapping, but we're not going to go over that. Well, first let's just look at opacity, and for this I'm going to reset that, and I think I'm going to get rid of that black and white, and I'm going to go into my black circle. And I like to double click on it to say, okay, indeed, that is my black circle. And go into effects control. Right here, it also says black circle, so that's another indicator. I'm going to turn it on. And I can double click on it. And when I double click on it, you'll see I get little handles here, so I can change the scale. And I can also, if I move my cursor to the outside, I can rotate it, which is, it's circles, so that's not going to be very helpful now. But certainly scaling it. A couple of things I can do. I'm going to go over here and look at my opacity. And I have something called blend mode, and that's the same thing that you see in Photoshop. And in layers. So I'm going to go ahead and say darken. So it's going to give me all the pixels that are darker on the upper layer. and get rid of all the pixels that are whiter or lighter. And so because I made it white, there are no actual white pixels probably in this photograph, and so the whole background disappears very, very nicely. And you see I also have this opacity here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a keyframe, which you actually created when you made fade-ins. I'm just going to do it a little bit differently, and you have a little more control here. So I'm going to click on this to toggle the animation, and when I click on this little stopwatchy looking thing here, this keyframe appears. So I'm just going to go ahead, and before I do that, I'm going to start. I want my animation to start over here. And I'm going to click on a keyframe saying that I want the image to start here at the beginning. And I also want it to be at 0. Then I'm going to move in a little bit and move my keyframe and move my image, and I can see the little square there, and I'm going to make it 100%. So let's go and look at what I just did. So I made 2 keyframes. Watch the opacity go from 0. The blend will stay the same, but you'll see all of this kind of move. Okay, so that fades in. I don't really want to have this fading, so I'm going to have this opacity at 0 and go back to my circle. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that's the opacity. It's very similar to the way you do it in here, but you have a little more control. I'm going to go into the motion, and I'm going to just reset that back to 0 and see how we can do that in a different way. So I'm going to click on position, and you can see now that it's creating some keyframes, and I'm going to click on scale and move those over. So start over here, and you see my position numbers change. So these are -37 and +303 horizontal and vertical. And the scale is at 100%, and I'm going to take this to the beginning and add a keyframe. Keyframe here, and maybe I'll bring that opacity up a little bit just so we can see what we're doing. Okay, and that now I'm going to, I think I will do position first and move this along a little bit. And when I do that, I'm going to move this here. And you see these numbers change, and so I can change it this way. And then I can move it forward a little bit, get rid of that, and create a new keyframe, and then move it a little further along and make a new keyframe, and then finally make it go to the end of my clip, make a new keyframe, and have the ball bounce up and out. Okay, and so here I've made kind of a trace. So what we're going to do is bring my playback head to the beginning and see what I created over those 10 seconds. Okay, and so not quite so smooth, but I can work on that. And so what I see here is at each keyframe I have these vector points with handles, and if you can grab those, you can see that you can actually smooth out those actions and actually edit the flow of the whole kind of thing. So that turns. And keep going with that. Okay, so the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my playback head to the beginning, and I'm going to change the scale as well. I'm going to start out and I'm going to create a keyframe, and I'm going to make this smaller. Now I can do that here, or I can do it here. And then I'm going to go a little bit further and bring that scale up, and I can go a lot further and bring it up and type in 100%. And then I can actually go off the edge, and maybe I'll bring it back down again and create a new keyframe. Okay. Oops. Make sure my keyframe is there and bring it back down. Okay. And then look at my motion path. It goes back and forth and spins around and speeds up out. All right.